talking a little bit about how therapists can become neuroaffirming. And we have a list of kind of self-reflective questions therapists can think about. And the next one is about self-awareness and self-knowledge. Does the autistic individual that the therapist is working with understand anything about their strengths and barriers as an autistic person? So, what recommendations do you have for therapists to kind of dig deeper into that question?
Well, this is where it's kind of a double-edged sword because how can you help the autistic individual better understand themselves and look at their strengths if you don't know what their strengths are? And research so far has suggested that what some people consider autistic strengths, literature points to as deficits.
Mhm.
So even autistics are confused because all the feedback we get is that we only have deficits where we don't develop correctly, we don't do things correctly. Um, uh, we have to be taught how to behave. Um, we are trained to look and act like everyone else. So where do we ever develop a sense of self?
Mhm.
Um, who is point? And you can pointedly ask, and that's a very broad question. What are your strengths? If I asked you, what are your strengths? You would really have to stop and think, well, I don't much think about that.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I know I have them, but it would take you a while. And autistics are like, I don't know. No one's ever asked me that. What is a strength?
Mhm.
Now, the kids growing up today, the younger ones, that's something that even their parents now are pointing out. Yes, he's a superhero. He's got these strengths. So you see the younger kids saying, I'm a superhero in this area, their area of special interest. So they're growing up with a little bit better sense of self, whereas those of us who have not received support um, or maybe have gone through ABA because that's the only training we received when we were diagnosed, um, no one has ever addressed that with us. And
Mhm.
then they wonder why autistics uh, remain so dependent. I mean, you've got close to 90% of autistics still living at home with their parents
Mhm.
because they can't find work. And it's not that they can't. No one has ever pointed out using your strengths to find a job that uses those strengths.
Mhm.
The even among the autistic adults that I know who have gone through voc rehab, they look at, oh, she has an interest in being outdoors, even though she has um, uh, a college degree and in multiple languages she can speak. Um, oh, she should become a gardener. They always think in terms of these low skilled jobs and matching them up with, they don't take into account their actual strengths. Yes, that's an interest. A lot of us enjoy being outdoors. That doesn't mean we should go into gardening as a career.
Yes.
But this is where it is so essential. If you want that individual to grow up, become independent, you've got to build on their strengths, make them aware of their strengths, how they can use those strengths to get around the obstacles in their life,
Mhm.
because otherwise they become dependent on the people around them, which is why autistic adults live at home or in group homes, the majority of them, not because they don't have the intelligence or the ability to work independently. They have simply been trained to be dependent.
Mhm. So I love how you talked kind of across the generations because I see the same thing with my little clients I work with. The parents are becoming more aware of, okay, this is how my child learns, this is a strength. So I think with some parents, it is evolving. There's still other parents that I think they they're still learning about autism, still learning what
Mhm.
does that really mean, and maybe confused and maybe going through any kind of grieving process of understanding. But then on the other generation, like you talked about, the older autistic adults who now they're older and they didn't have that support, which is really heartbreaking. And so I love the tools that we have where the personal strengths that autistics can identify in themselves and advocate. And then even the checklist that we have that parents and therapists can fill out of what they observe as autistic strengths. And those are all freebies on our website. And I love that people can go through and it's always common sense, but like we've talked about in the past, we don't always see those as strengths. Like you said, most people view what they like, their interests. And yeah, that's great, but interests aren't always the only strength. Picking up patterns, seeing the detail, like those are strengths, and those are strengths to build on that are way more versatile than just loving nature. So I'm glad you
Mhm.
pointed that out. So awesome, Sue. Great information. And like I said, those are freebies on our website that parents can use to advocate for their children. Like, hey, this is my child's strength. Autistics can use to advocate for themselves and to discover themselves. And then therapists can use to develop goals based on building on strengths. Awesome. Thanks, Sue.
Thanks, Stacy.